Melissa Crandall began her writing career penning media tie-in novels for Star Trek, Quantum Leap, and Earth 2. In 2008, small press Seventh Circle Books published a collection of her short speculative fiction, Darling Wendy and Other Stories. Her latest book is Weathercock, a fantasy novel, published in January of this year. She is at work on another novel called Of Blood. Thank you, Melissa. Next, I would like to introduce Dulcie Brainerd, who will award poetry. Dulcie Brainerd retired as a book review editor at Publishers Weekly, where one of her areas of responsibility was the poetry section. She holds an MFA in poetry from Sarah Lawrence, has had few poems published, and she is a regular at the library's one-page poetry circle discussions. Thank you, Dulcie. Finally, I would like to introduce to you Madge McKeithen, who will award nonfiction. Madge McKeithen teaches nonfiction writing at the New School University in Manhattan. Her essays have appeared in literary journals, anthologies, newspapers, and in her collection, Blue Peninsula, published by Farrar, Straus, and Grow in 2006. For the last 2 years, she has led the monthly poetry circle on Wednesday nights here at the library. She has had 2 book projects underway and a new online course to be offered in the spring of 2012 on writing personal essays in a changing world. Thank you, Madge. Now, without further delay, I'd like to invite Melissa Crandall to the podium to present the winning entries in fiction.
Thank you. This is my second year serving as a judge for the Darien Teen Writing Contest. I really love this job. Not only do I get to hand out prizes, but I get a chance to read the work of some young writers who I sincerely believe will one day make their mark in the written word. On the topic of this year's stories, I'd like to say this. Stories sometimes appear to follow a trend. You know how lately it seems you can't open a book without reading about vampires or zombies? Well, there are trends in other areas as well, even within this contest. I find that really interesting since presumably the writers are not discussing their work with each other. Last year the trend was redemption. This year it was death, particularly suicide. I find that a little chilling, and I'll tell you why, and it's not because I think you're all contemplating it. In story after story, the solution to the protagonist's conflict, whether it occurred within themselves, with another person, or against society at large, was suicide. There was no attempt to battle their way through the conflict, no determination to survive, no moment of resolution when they found the will to battle the odds. I'm the last person to tell you how to write your stories, but this seems wrong to me. Heroes, by their very nature, fight. They don't always win. Sometimes they lose. Sometimes they die. Sometimes they need to die in order to move the story along. But to have a protagonist wail, "Poor me," and kill herself without even trying to get on top of the thing that is beating her down strikes me as lazy writing. It's cheating the story, your character, and your readers. There's no creativity in giving up unless that giving up makes sense to the entire story. There's no spark in surrender unless that surrender drives home a point. And there's no reason for a character to commit suicide just because you're having a hard time coming up with a creative way for them to fight their demons and maybe win. Let me give you an example. In one of the stories, and it was a very well-written story, by the way, the main character obviously possessed the skills to win the day, but instead, he bowed his head and let himself be killed rather than use that knowledge to his benefit. Would it have taken some hard work on the writer's part to figure out a way for the character to defeat his enemy? Sure it would. Would that work have made a difference in the story? You bet. If you are serious about writing, and I assume that everyone here is, don't cut corners. Don't sell yourself or your characters cheap. Don't be lazy. If the direction the story is going in doesn't work for you, change it. And if you must have a character die, let that death matter. And on that cheerful note, let's have some awards. First up will be grades 7 through 9. Honorable mention goes to a story that deftly juggles 2 enormous fears: abandonment in the form of leave-taking and isolation, and death. Despite the seriousness of the subject matter, there is a wry humor to this story that actually made me laugh out loud a couple of times. That's an important skill to have as a writer, so you don't drag your reader down into an inescapable bog of depression. This year's grade 7 through 9 honorable mention goes to Caroline Fian for Rooftops. goes to a story that addresses another great fear, especially for young people, and something that is too often part of their reality: divorce. This author has a good grasp of the basic mechanics of writing, as well as a wonderful use of imagery that really shines in its juxtaposition of the world of nature against the unnatural world that has become her life. Second prize in grades 7 through 9 goes to Amanda Slode for The Locket. Well done, Amanda. That's an excellent story. Our first prize winner in grades 7 through 9 absolutely blew me away. When I first received the stories, they hadn't yet been broken into age groups, so I read everything through with a blind eye, kind of getting a feel for each story compared to every other story in the batch. Even with the competition of both age groups, this story rose straight to the top. If I'd had to pick only one first prize winner out of all the submissions I received, this would have been it. The subject matter is mature, and the imagery is strong. In fact, the story is so well written that I assumed the author was from one of the upper grades, but not so. Imagine my surprise and my delight. First prize in grades 7 through 9 goes to Morgan Peters for What They Say. Well done, Morgan. Now we'll do grades 10 through 12. Honorable mention goes to a story of broken dreams and a fractured mind, filled with beautifully crafted, sometimes painful, sometimes glorious imagery. It asks a twofold question. How much of ourselves will we allow to be sacrificed to another, and what demands do we make on others to sacrifice on our behalf? In grades 10 through 12, honorable mention goes to Francesca Begos for Wonder Bread. Second prize in grades 10 through 12 goes to a powerful and creepy story. It's a tale full of dark shadows and darker impulses, a story that holds a mirror up to our tendency to keep our heads down and eyes averted, to mind our own business rather than get involved in the troubles of another. It's a story that touches the heart with an icy finger and makes one wonder, how far would I go in this situation? Second place in grades 10 through 12 goes to Alice Corrigan for Idle.
Thank you. Sorry.
Our first prize winner in grades 10 through 12 is a nifty little story that takes a serious look at how we fool ourselves into believing what we want to believe, how we let our heads be turned by those bearing gifts even when we know them to be our enemy. This author has a solid grasp of writing mechanics, a good use of dialogue, a lively imagination, and an appealing style that drew me right into the story. First place in grades 10 through 12 goes to Catherine Bouffard, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, The Enemy Among Us. Thank you.
Thank you, Melissa.
I want to say before I get into talking about the poetry submissions that I think Melissa has just given everyone in this room a wonderful gift. People who work with young people writing are impelled to be encouraging because it's such a hard row to hoe. And sometimes that encouragement can be kind of soft. And Melissa just offered you some ways to make some demands upon yourselves that I think may be one of the most valuable things you get today, prize or not prize. So thank you. There were many poetry submissions this year, 28 actually, in both categories. And there were many wonderful things about them. One of the first is how varied they were and how well they demonstrate the range of what poetry can be in our lives. 11 of these poems were written in rhyme with different schemes. That was unexpected to me. There was a prose poem that was very nicely done. Some poems were focused very tightly on single concrete images or discrete experiences, and others had narratives and characters that read like fairy tales in verse. Many poems explored feelings directly and bravely, I'll say, and some poems revealed the feelings that inspired them by unfolding subtly and drawing the reader in to their world. Many of the poems are grounded in nature and rise from moments of thoughtful solitude, reminding us all that in everyone's programmed, socialized, busy life, time alone is still precious and recognized as being important. There are poems about family, poems sparked by encounters with fictional characters, poems that reference other poems, which is another reminder that the poetry we read, as well as the poetry we write, happens in a historical context that belongs to others as well as to ourselves. There were poems about joyful moments, poems about music, love, poems about doubt and despair, about personal crises, and about high aspirations. Two particularly notable things about the entries as a whole are, one, that how well the writers have made room in their poems for different responses on the part of their readers. These poems, that's what I mean by that, is these poems don't tell readers what they're supposed to think about the topic or how they're supposed to feel about the experience being described. And I was very impressed that these writers seem to have come so early to understand that their readers are as individual and as diverse in their emotions and their thinkings as the writer feels that he or she is. And that seems very mature to me. Another notable aspect of the poems is the writer's love of language. I think that should be a given, but it isn't always. There are poems that use simple syntax, short, clear words, think reading Hemingway, and then others that seem to soak in the possibilities of words, verbs and adjectives and nouns, as if they were an ocean, the syllables building like waves. And there is in every one of these poems the recognition that these words and how they're put together have that cosmic rhythm, and that no matter what the writer's subject or intent is, there is a rhythm in these poems and in this attempt to describe experiences that is as important to us as all the other rhythms by which we lead our lives. I'd also like to honor the teachers at Middlesex and the high school whose devotion and attention have nurtured the efforts of these young writers, and Erica and the rest of the children's and teens staff at the library who make this contest possible. Without all of you, these young writers might wither, and that's a terrible prospect. So that said, I organized myself a little bit differently. I'll start with 7th and 9th, but I'm going to start with first prize. And the first prize winner in this group has written a poem about creation as seen in the rising of the sun. There are images, mature images of symphonic music, even specific instruments that reverberate along with precisely evoked visual images to enact the joy and the power of life itself. When you read this poem, note the language, especially the sounds of the words and the brilliant use of verbs. First prize for Song of the Universe goes to Zachariah Smart. Entirely different in feeling and tone and language, a poem called Sent to My Room relates a rollicking, playful exchange between the speaker and his or her mother. With rhyme and goodwill and lots of technological acronyms, this is a thoroughly current poem that's sure to make you smile when you read it. Second prize for Sent to My Room goes to Peter Mobo. I'd like to have given honorable mention to a number of poems in this group, but the poem that rose to the top among them has a lyrical clarity that makes it last in your memory. It's a simple rhythmic observation about a big universal emotion. This poem, I'll Go Down to the Shore, has no extraneous words, and it has a big heart. Honorable mention to Crosby Marine. First prize in the grades 10 through 12 category is awarded to a poem that seems to have been written off or sparked by a character in a story. Its language and the use of line breaks are sophisticated and effective. Powerful images, some disturbing, are well controlled, as is the development of the poem. Another notable aspect is the writer's references to the works of other recognized poets, demonstrating that this young poet understands that even as you write or read alone, poems are part of a tradition, coming from a source that has a present as well, that has a past as well as a present. First prize in the 10 to 12 category goes to Reflection by Shruti Raghuraman. Again, in an entirely different mode, the second prize offers us a small angle on a larger possibility, which is also central to poetry throughout the ages. In rhyme, the writer observes a turtle and considers what the qualities of turtle have to do with the writer's sense of his or herself as a human. The poem, My Small Turtle, is short, little, as gems are short, are small and little, and it uses language. I'm sorry, what did I do here? The poem, My Small Turtle, I'll just stick to it, is short and little, as gems are little, in which language is used to mean considerably more than its words. Second prize to Lisa Randall for My Small Turtle. Honorable mention goes to a poem that offers an impressive contrast. It's a narrative about a boy finding himself, or not, as he grows up. Full of words with many syllables and flowing in lengthy lines and sentences, There Was a Boy Who Lived to Emulate relishes the sounds of its lush words. Enjoy the sounds yourselves as you read it, and its complexities as you read through There Was a Boy Who Lived to Emulate by McKinley Stauffer. Congratulations to all the winners, but thanks to everybody who entered, because it was a real pleasure. It was a delight to read these. Thank you.
Nonfiction comes in many shapes, sizes, and sounds, from literary diaries and journals and memoir to personal essays and literary journalism. It includes nature writing and travel writing, science essays, cultural criticism, journalistic essays, and with the attachment of creative, the field gives rise to debates about the blur between fiction and faction, about interpretation, and the malleability and plasticity of notions of memory and truth. The submissions in this year's writing contest spring from many parts of the field: personal story, impassioned argument, comparative historical analysis, image-rich recollections of past experiences, and incisive perspectives on recent experience. I'd like to speak just briefly about the papers as a group and then about each of the winners. First, as a reader, as a writer, and as a teacher of writing, I thank you for your work. Every paper puts something significant at stake: beauty observed and the challenge of conveying it, love and loss, beliefs and ways of thinking, family, school, environments that shape us, writing and music as art and forms of human expression, celebrity and fame, the elusiveness of a moment, and rising to a challenge. No dullness. Every piece bright with yearning and ambition. How could a reader not thank you for that? And the bright ambition showed up at paragraph and sentence and word levels. Every essay was clearly structured, and some were deft in transitions and progressions of thought. Compelling observations and nuanced expressions filled many paragraphs, and in several instances, choice words, just so, in phrases and dependent clauses lifted the story beyond the story, and the reader experienced the words the writer had used to convey his or her experience. The second life of art, as Eugenio Montale described it in his essay by the same name. Grades 7 to 9. And I did the reverse order. I went honorable mention second then first. Contrarian in the best sense of the word, the writer who earned honorable mention in grades 7 to 9 supported a non-traditional stance with careful comparisons, detailed reading and documentation, and direct, straightforward prose. While certain throughout of the writer's perspective, this reader felt constantly engaged in a conversation and never browbeaten. The writer manages a significant body of factual material and infuses it with personal opinion and persuasion. Honorable mention to the author of... Where's my stack? To the author of The Protestant Reformation versus the Scientific Revolution, Kelly Brustman. An artist's sensitivity to detail permeates the second place essay in grades 7 to 9. Not only does this writer do more than justice to persons, places, and things in the descriptive writing style that makes this piece stand apart, but ways of speaking and gestures are richly textured, as evidenced in a line such as, "He would reach into the pocket in his khakis, finger his wallet, and in one swift motion whip it out and pull out a picture of his 4 granddaughters." This essay uses a single object to begin the piece, opening out to broader experience, as personal essays that focus intently and fully on the specific powerfully deliver the general. Second place goes to the author of Drawer to the Past, Sloan Ruffa. A delight of the first place essay in grades 7 to 9 is the strong association first with the corporeal, the writer's body, and then an occasional distancing that allows a doubling of the experience. When the cold invading the body is described vividly, the reader receives that experience. And when the narrator witnesses various parts of the body responding to the cold, as in, "I could sense my hand sending me a nonverbal thank you," the reader sees alongside the writer, and the piece reverberates with the experience and the seeing of the experience. First place in grades 7 to 9 goes to Helen Watson for Dreaming of Snow. Writing with passion about nature, in sentences that move, some long and absorbing, and some short with pith and pop, nature is the actor in this piece. The writer is the recipient. Bidding farewell to out of doors at the piece's end, the writer nods at nature's vastness and vulnerability, how passion can grow to protect with the line, "The show won't end because of me." Honorable mention in grades 10 to 12 to Sophie Holt for Encore, the Show of Nature. Wide-ranging diversity clearly delivered and the medium melding with the message are hallmarks of the second-place essay in grades 10 to 12. An ode in prose to music and the creation of it, the writer glides across multiple forms and myriad delivery systems. The tone of the prose similarly shifts from complex, compound sentences to conversational direct address, to fragments, to run-ons, to piles of questions. Form and function marry in these sentences, and the writer speaks from inside what is intimately known. Second place in grades 10 to 12 goes to Anjali Krishnamachar for The Making of Music. Evocative suggestiveness and restraint are tools ably handled by the author of the first place essay in grades 10 to 12. Dramatic tension is carefully built and released in a tribute to writing and to a grandfather and to the connections between those. The ultimate connection, powerfully rendered, is the deep love the narrator has for both. In what is an adventure story as well as a story of personal discovery, the narrator tells of his encounter with a particular story his or her journalist grandfather wrote, entitled "The Day I Forgot to Hug My Grandson." In a skillful use of time shifts, the writer returns to his infancy, reads of a special day, and says of his grandfather, "I finally understood his soft smile." The first place essay in grades 10 to 12 is Connor Ryan, The Immortality of Ink.
Thank you, Dulcie, Madge, and Melissa, and thank you to all the teens who participated this year. I'd now like to welcome you all to enjoy some refreshments and to pick up a copy of the book